as a studio, I'm glad we're here after 20 years.
People say, how do you work somewhere for 20 years? Well, in the game business, you are lucky enough to work at a studio that still exists after 25. And that's rare and a wonderful thing. And that just comes back to the DNA of the studio.
There's this secret little culture that I think has just never left ArenaNet.
We respect our players immensely. Like anything, any decision we're making, it's players first, right? Like make sure that we're doing right by them.
A huge part of what makes ArenaNet unique is when we start out to build a brand new game from scratch, and this process was used to make Guild Wars 1, it's used to make Guild Wars 2. We'll use it for any game we ever make in the future. The idea is when we look at what are the player problems in the industry, what are the frustrations in the genre that players have, what are the opportunity spaces where there are things that we could solve for, that if we could solve those complex problems, that players would feel like games were more approachable, the genre was a better genre to play in.
I really believe that the game is a reflection of our culture, building a place where everyone is welcome.
Because we do have a fantastic community.
That just deepens our stories.
I really love the experience to be able to work on a game like this.
We're thrilled you're here. Come on.
Backstory of ArenaNet, yeah. So back in 2000, the three original founders of ArenaNet, Jeff, Pat, and Mo, left Blizzard, and they're often credited as the creators of BattleNet for Blizzard, which is a really big deal for those of us who grew up in the 90s or the 2000s, or even still today, BattleNet's still a big deal. And they wanted to form a new company based on the things that inspired by a lot of what they loved about Blizzard and the things that they wanted to create out of an entirely new game studio. So they started off, I believe, in Pat's living room, and then eventually ended up in Mo's living room, and then eventually they ended up getting a location that became the first spot that the studio was built out from. And now, 2 locations later, we're in this amazing location today.
The founders all came from an engineering and design background. And so they did some amazing things with pipelines and streaming and the technology, the foundation of the engine that Guild Wars was built on.
So I got started in 2003. ArenaNet was kind of an unknown then still. We hadn't shipped Guild Wars yet. But I knew the pedigree of the 3 founders. They all had great reputations, been at Blizzard, and so there was a lot of that DNA that they wanted to bring up here and start this studio.
If you go back to all the way to the beginning and the roots of when Guild Wars 1 was created, the #1 player problem back in the early 2000s that was identified was, why do people have to pay a subscription fee to play these giant online MMO games with their friends? And so everything about Guild Wars 1 was created with the idea of solving for an online game that we could run without having to charge a monthly subscription fee, which was, especially at the time, they were expensive. It's a big limiting factor to get people in to play your game. And so Guild Wars 1 was built from the ground up with every single piece of the game taken into account of how to operate it incredibly inexpensively.
So when I was still contracting on audio, I met with a couple of the founders, Jeremy and I, and we were talking about integrating the music and then talking about all the fancy stuff you could do with audio. One of the founders said, no, we're not doing that. Like, what do you mean? This game's gonna be awesome, it should have awesome audio. It is going to have awesome audio. We have a good, solid audio system, and we've hired people that are gonna make great sounds, but all that stuff you wanna do, we don't need to do, because that's not what this game is about. This game is about multiplayer online play, cooperative play. To me, that was huge. That was where someone said, yes, we're doing this, but we're not doing this.
So everything about the way that our servers work, the way that we pass data across the internet, we kind of invented the microservices model that is so common today with AWS and all these other shared services, and built it at ArenaNet before it really was a common thing anywhere else with distributed networking. We had a physics simulation that was incredibly inexpensive. Those of us on the design team spent a huge amount of our time evaluating exact rules of when creatures woke up in the world and when they went to sleep. All of these things to reduce the overhead of running a giant online game, to solve the core player problem of creating an online game that we could just sell and not have to charge a subscription fee for.
There was only about 20 of us at the time at the start of the studio, so everybody had to wear a lot of different hats.
For many years, I was volunteering for whatever needed to get done. So I took the screenshots that were on the back of like the boxes for Prophecies and Factions. I made trailers.
I was a 3D artist at the time, and so I got my start doing a lot of odd jobs initially. First 2 major roles at the studio was one to design the company logo and the Guild Wars logo, and then the other one was to develop sort of initial concepts for what our UI for Guild Wars was going to be.
Before I came to work here, one of the things that had me most excited when I read about the Guild Wars franchise was the idea that this is a studio that was willing to take their game very early in development and just put it out there for as much feedback as possible. There's a moment where a few years before launch, they took Guild Wars to E3, they put it on the show floor, and they turned the game on online so that anyone globally could play the game online at the same time in alpha form with the people on the show floor at E3. And that was unheard of. There had never been anything done like that before.
And we all went down to Los Angeles and we hit the convention floor. This was our chance to kind of make a mark of like, this is our game. And a lot of people hadn't heard of it yet. I mean, that was just an electric moment of that first sense of like, people like what we're doing.
Just the amount of interest, the amount of passion, the amount that we saw our community grow kind of overnight just by letting people play the game. I don't know about the higher ups, but like me personally at that point, I was like, oh yeah, we got something here.
There were so many golden moments from that show.
There was a brief period of time where actually Guild Wars Live at E3 was like the 5th largest online game in the world when it was just a demo.
At the very end of the event, ended up having a party in like the main town. It was Ascalon City at the time. I was actually the video recorder at the time, so I was sitting there doing fly-throughs of the crowds and just watching them do like conga lines and stuff like that. And just seeing all of the hype, like seeing all the players being like, oh my God, I'm so sad this is getting shut down. I can't wait for it to come out. Like it was a moment.
One of our core tenets, and this has been part of Guild Wars 1 and Guild Wars 2, was to make something that was artisanal, handcrafted, and to make something that didn't look computer generated. That when you're looking at a frame, that you're looking at a piece of art versus like, oh, a CG experiment. Like how far can we push this?
So for Guild Wars, the original Guild Wars, there's a whimsy to it that I don't see in a lot of games.
We're not trying to be super grungy or serious all the time.
You know, the art style, it's not just an art style, it's a art concept.
But I enjoy the push at ArenaNet to like push forms a little bit bigger, to exaggerate things a little bit more, to work more in that stylized realm.
In some of the maps, like they're the big icebergs that look like ships. You know, that's what I mean about it's more of an art concept than an art style. You're like, mixes stuff together in ways where that's recognizable but fresh.
It's a weird IP in some ways, right? Because it has, bits of fantasy, it has bits of sci-fi, it's dragons, but it's also jade golems and floating cube cities and a little bit of cyberpunk over here, but a little bit, medieval over here. It's a really vast world.
One of the big things as we were continuing to move forward was that we didn't want technology to be in itself what we're gonna hang our hat on. You don't look at Mario Brothers and say, oh, that looks lesser than. It is what it is, and it's 100% correct for what it is. It's not trying to do different things. It's not trying to do mocap, and all of these technological advancements. It's just going, they're pixels, they're colored pixels, and it's fun and it works.
At the beginning, when I first joined the company, Guild Wars 1 was kind of an experiment. Like we were trying to figure out how to create storied missions and campaigns that could be experienced in any order and allow players to kind of take these characters, go on these fantastical journeys, all through the lens of a skill capping system where the skill builds and customization was all part of it.
So some of the unique things that brought people to the Guild Wars franchise, especially early on, that separated it from the other games in the MMO space, was our focus on what we call horizontal progression. The idea being that you could level your character up to max level very, very quickly. Guild Wars 1 only had 20 levels in it. And so in a matter of a couple of days, a week, you could get your character up to max level.
When I first started here, Guild Wars 1 was quite a bit smaller. What we call explorable zones between the actual missions, they weren't in yet. Originally, we assumed that PvE would be sort of a staging ground for people to learn the core mechanics of the game, and then eventually they would shift over to the PvP side of the game. And we actually found throughout the development that players really gravitated towards the sort of PvE side of Guild Wars 1. We thought it was going to be more like you do the PvE area to learn the functionality of the game, and then you shift over to PvP. But it turns out that people really just wanted more of that PvE experience. So we added the explorable zones, which, God, when I think about it, it probably tripled the amount of playable space there was on the PvE side, because that was the bulk of the play space.
Back in 2007, my husband actually started playing first, and I was just reading a book on the couch. I glanced up and saw this beautiful, pastoral landscape on his computer screen and had this moment of, what's that? It was the original Guild Wars. It was Pre-Searing, which is the tutorial area, basically, if you're not familiar, and it was absolutely stunning. And I wanted to play too.
Pre-Searing Ascalon, that got added pretty late. That was kind of an 11th hour addition. I think it made the game, honestly.
It was on that day that the Char discovered a way around the Great Wall.
The game originally started and you were in Ascalon and it was completely destroyed. And that's unfortunate to see this place that's all ruined, but by adding pre-searing and letting people get a glimpse of it pre-destruction, they got to see that loss. They're like, this place was beautiful, and look at it now. I mean, there's a lot of people to this day that still resent the Char race that we have in Guild Wars 2 as a playable race because of Ascalon, and that was 20 years ago?
Back when Guild Wars 1 first shipped, we had no idea what to do with the game after launch day. We were just hoping to ship and have it be successful. And so when all of these players poured into the game, and all of a sudden we had this giant audience, we all kind of looked at each other like, well, what do we do now? And so we spent a couple of months just having fun and inventing this place called Sorrow's Furnace, which was the first live update in the history of the Guild Wars franchise outside of holidays. And then we decided we really should have expansions in this game, because that, in a game with no subscription fee, we're gonna need expansions if we want to viably be able to pay to keep the business going. And we embarked on this absolutely crazy concept of every 6 months we were going to ship expansions. And so we shipped Guild Wars Factions, and it wasn't just an expansion, we called them campaigns because they were full expansion and they had an entire standalone entry part of the game that made it so you didn't even need to own the base game. You could just buy Guild Wars Factions as a standalone game, play the entire game level 1 to 20 in Factions, and then play the rest of the game on top of that.
And so I just want to say, I think I'm more proud of this game than anything that I've ever worked on.
When we originally launched Guild Wars Factions, it was the first time that I had been in the studio and we were launching the game. And this was really early on as in my days as a QA tester here at the company. It was special for a number of reasons. One is that the studio made us feel like we were part of it. It wasn't like QA was some outsourced group that was there to check their work, so to speak, or make sure that things were perfect. But we worked side by side with the developers, and we were proving to them what in-house QA could do. Being able to sit side by side with all these people as the button was being pressed, as we were letting all the new players into the new campaign, was phenomenal. And it was nice to be able to spend some time playing with them in real time.
The game is running smooth as silk. The problems that we're working on this last day are tiny, tiny little problems, compared to any other release we've ever done. So,
that's why I say something different.
So let's give everyone here a hand for the great work they've done.
And we did that, and then 6 months later, we turned around and shipped another one of those called Guild Wars Nightfall.
Nightfall is officially launched. We're launching here a couple hours early. And so what we're going to do here is bring it up on the big screen TV so you can see. Now here's the trick. Nightfall doesn't go on sale until tomorrow. Okay? So the only people who are getting it at this point are, there are some stores that sold it before they were supposed to sell it. Some people have it at home. And then we started selling it online a couple hours ago. And we've had 2,000 people buy access keys online so far.
And we realized this is crazy. What are we doing? We can't build an entire new game every 6 months and keep repeating it. It was exhausting and really hard on the team. But also, if you think back on it, the idea of a massive expansion like that every 6 months, it's borderline unheard of in the history of the MMO space, and it's pretty incredible we pulled it off.
No. We have to go up here to damage him, and then once he gets back, he falls and like we damage his core, and then he stands back up, and we need to go back up that way.
I really love the mantra that like we are game developers, but first and foremost we're community developers, and we just do it the best way possible, which is through games. And so a lot of the pillars that we put in terms of the design philosophy was always trying to make it so you were excited about seeing other players, and how do we create that close-knit friendships, those collaborative experiences, because that's what transcends time. And so ultimately it was going to be the stories that players took away from the game, not necessarily the game itself.
I love Guild Wars a lot. I mean, a lot. I love Guild Wars 1 a lot. I played the assassin class from Factions, and at the time, that was the most hated class because all the nerds were like, oh, Naruto, let's play assassin, let's go. I just liked the class, okay? I thought it was a fun class, I was really into it, and I was unwilling to give up, so I was an assassin main. Getting a group to want an assassin because it was just flooded at the time was nearly impossible in Guild Wars 1, especially right after Factions. So I could not find a group to get through missions. So what I ended up having to do was become a leader and say, okay, anyone's welcome. I'll be the leader, I'll form up this group to go into this mission. And at times we would sometimes have 4 assassins, and they were like, there's no way we can do this. And I said, yes, there is, okay? I have this build, if you do this build, and if you try this build, right? We can do this. And they weren't sure. I said, no, we can do this. We try it, we succeed. And I did this multiple times with different groups of like oddball like setups of classes. And they were always impressed when we could finish at the end, and we could. When I reflect back on it, it was kind of the first time I got confidence in being a leader. It sounds silly, but like this game taught me what does it mean to be a leader, especially in hard times.
Building a place where everyone is welcome. That was the core element behind all the mechanics that we've designed, the story that we tell.
They know that they can come to our game and there's something to do, there's people to hang out with.
The fact that you can play with a stranger and they're not going to kill you on sight, but instead when you are in need of help, they can help you. We incentivize being a good human. You get XP for reviving a downed person. You can share the consumables you make with other people to help them get through a fight. There are like little things that we do in how we make the game function that incentivize better camaraderie.
Now he's dead. No, come on.
I've had interactions in the past on our social media channels where somebody who was new to the community did not really understand how something worked, and it wasn't that they were necessarily saying something hateful or negative, it was just indicating that they were new. So many times I could just sit back, I didn't need to do anything because our existing community would come in and help them and show them, this is how it works here. We're thrilled you're here, come on.
And remember, my friend, you never fight alone.
Right about then, we realized that the things we were trying to do with Guild Wars 1 wasn't going to be viable for us 10, 15 years later, for us to keep building on top of the franchise and growing the way that we wanted to. And we looked around and we were building a project then called Guild Wars Utopia.
We were always continuing to push the bounds of types of features that we wanted in, the types of skills that we wanted into the game. And that's when we really started experimenting with what would a true new iteration of the franchise look like. And so when we were actually talking about Utopia originally as a kind of the 4th campaign, a lot of the ideas were, hey, I think we need to go back to the beginning. We need to restart some of this conversation. So it really was about always trying to find some innovative way to push forward, to find meaning in the design choices that we were making and not just putting things in for the sake of, here's a new bullet for the back of the box. And that was kind of the impetus of how we started focusing on Guild Wars 2.
And so a large chunk of the ideas for Utopia and the development for Utopia and the developers moved on to start building the concept for Guild Wars 2. And we stayed and built one more expansion, Guild Wars Eye of the North, which was very much designed to both close the story of Guild Wars 1, but also to be a setup for Guild Wars 2 that would release later.
And when we were building Eye of the North, we kind of knew, here's some of the stuff that we're gonna set the seeds for. These mountain ranges that you were like, if you squint, you would realize that this is a dragon.
At the time, we had a very mature game and mature community, and like they had a lot of tools and tricks in everything. They'd come up with all the perfect builds and everything like that. So it was actually really exciting to be able to be like, we could kind of take the gloves off now.
The initial pitch for Guild Wars 2, just like inside the studio, felt like the vision was so compelling.
We're under attack!
The first thing we would talk about in the meetings when they were like, here's what we're gonna do, was the open world nature of the game and open world events, and saying, we're not gonna do quests where you've got a character with an exclamation point over their head. There's just going to be centaurs attacking this farm, and you'll see the centaurs attacking, and you'll be like, I'm gonna save those people.
This idea of, okay, we can build these dynamic zones, we can add like vertical jumping, which wasn't part of the original Guild Wars 1. And as we started exploring more and more of this, we just wanted to go, tear the engine down to those bare bones and then rebuild it up as kind of that next iteration.
So it is a drastically different game, but I do feel like the heart of Tyria really carried over. Like even the map design is a very good example where you go to certain areas of maps and it's like, yeah, this is what I would expect that same place to look like 250 years later.
MMOs are definitely a challenge to work on and to create. You have to think about, how do you tell a compelling story over 10 years? That's not an easy thing to do.
It is overwhelming working on an MMO all the time. There is no harder type of game that you can make in game development. It is the most complex with the most variables and the largest scope of games and the largest array of players who all want different experiences.
Putting on our storyteller's hat, okay, we're writing a story that's designed to take a player tens or even hundreds of hours to complete. We want to give you a lot of side content. We want to make sure that we're giving you just enough, but not too much. There's a lot of lore that we want to convey.
And the firstborn awakened.
So trying to figure out how to pace it, where you put it, are there different channels you put it in? This will be voiced, this will be a thing that you read when you click on it. This is optional, but this has to be done.
You get a lot of random things in your game that maybe make it less cohesive, but they all come from a particular dev that is very passionate about one thing, and finds an audience for that one thing, because it's an MMO, there's a very large audience.
So with Guild Wars 2, it was just like, okay, what do we have to work with? We went from characters being hand-painted textures that took about a week to full ZBrush models that took 6 or 7 weeks to create. And the detail and everything, it was more, but the time was more as well. So, okay, well, how do we plan around that?
And yet, I sense darkness approaching.
The first year that we took the playable demo for Guild Wars 2 to Gamescom in Germany, and it was really like the giant coming out party for Guild Wars 2 to the world. We did our huge announcement trailer. We brought the game to the show floor to let people play it for the first time. And the first morning before Gamescom opened, we were doing a rehearsal on the show floor. And we had a bunch of dev commands turned on that made it so like enemies couldn't see us and we were invisible in the world, and we were running around making sure the demo that was gonna go okay. And there was a press outlet that we didn't know was there, and they recorded our screen and recorded all the footage. And they leaked the footage that night, and it was like this grainy, really crappy looking footage that showed the game in the worst possible light, because we were using all these dev commands. All our characters were invisible, so all the enemies were just standing around in the world not doing anything. And everyone was freaking out. They're like, this game looks terrible, the AI is awful, what have they done? They've ruined the Guild Wars franchise. And we all saw that the first night, and we were heartbroken. What an awful way to start the convention where our game was gonna get shown. And then the next day, the show floor opens, and everybody gets to come in and start playing the game for the first time. And we show all the trailers and all the game footage for real, with enemies actually reacting to players, and people lost their minds. And the line on the show floor was so long to play the game that they reached the point every day where they had to stop the line, because the convention, that I think was like 10 or 12 hours long each day, the line was longer than anyone would ever get to play the game.
The queues were maxed out because we did this like 30, 40 minute experience, because we want to make sure people had a real chance to experience everything that it had to offer. But we also knew, given that it was designed to be played with players, we needed the studio support, right? So it felt like the world was alive, because there's nothing worse than like playing an MMO when there's no one around you and you're missing one of the core components for it.
So we're like, all right, here's the plan. everyone at the studio is going to play the game that week. We'll all be in the game, running around, acting like we're just more people. So we had the whole studio switched to European time for the week, starting the workday at midnight.
So the whole studio went on graveyard shift for a week. The whole office was playing with the players in Germany, and they had food trucks across the whole night, 3 food trucks a day, and ice buckets of Monster Energy drink to keep us awake. And we had a command center where people had like a big virtual map of the game, and we could see dots where players are, and if we ever saw a player stray too far away, we'd send a pack of devs over to play with them. And so that was kind of like a LAN party experience for a whole week before launch. Like that's awesome.
It was a magical moment.
And I tell you what, those 5 days in Germany, like it changed everything for the Guild Wars 2 development team, because we left and we knew we had something.
My gosh, there was so much hype, and we had a joke for a while. Unfortunately, for some of these sites, it was not a joke. If we linked to a press article, if we linked to a fan site, they would immediately get the internet hug of death and be crushed under the traffic that we sent. So we were trying to, at one point, we were trying to warn journalists, hey, in 2 hours, I'm going to link to your website. Like, I don't know what you need to do, but you should start doing it now, because everyone was so unbelievably excited.
Guild Wars 2, very similar core business model, box price to buy the game, no subscription fee at launch.
So it was actually launch night. We were going to turn the game on at midnight. Servers are getting ready to be turned on. We had this big TV that was hooked up and could give us a graph of like logins and concurrency. And, everybody's waiting, bated breath. There was this like ceremonial moment of, all right, boom, the servers are live. And then we saw that number go from like 0 and it shot up. I mean, it was hundreds of thousands. It could have been 1 million people that night seeing that in that moment and going, oh, we actually made a game that people want to play and that they like. It was incredible, and I'll never forget that moment.
So the night that we launched Guild Wars 2, Isaiah Cartwright, who was the lead systems designer at the time, the two of us were housemates. We were here for the initial celebration. So we heard the speeches about, the gratitude that NCSoft had, the gratitude that the founders had for helping us get to this point. And the second that they pushed the button, we ran down, we skipped the rest of the party, we jumped in the car, drove home, because we immediately had to get home to play with the players. Because it was important for us. We had built this community, whether through the beta events that we had some huge world versus world battles, epic back then, but this was a chance for us to really continue to experience this. It was so cool to be there in that moment that that was more important to us than celebrating with the rest of the studio.
But then as the reviews started coming out and as more people started playing it, more people started buying it, and it got so big that our servers were refusing connections. It was just overload. And we actually made the deliberate decision to stop sales for a day or two just to control the number of people coming in.
We were struggling to keep everything running because there were so many people online, and we took one night off for all of us to just go celebrate. We rented out a restaurant and bar at the top floor of a mall in downtown Seattle, across the street from PAX. And we thought a bunch of our fans are gonna show up, we'll get to meet them, this is gonna be incredible. And we got there, and 5 hours before the party started, there was a line all the way around the top floor of the mall that wound down to the middle floor of the mall. And by the time the party started, the line had wound all the way down to the bottom floor of the mall. And all night long, just every time somebody would leave and another person came in, there was just this wonderful, joyous celebration with all of our fans. We signed, I don't know how many thousands of different posters and artwork and body parts awkwardly that night, and all sorts of shirts, all sorts of stuff. But it was just this pure moment of the fans and the developers we were all one, celebrating this launch of this game all together that we all loved. I will remember that for the rest of my life.
Victory at last.
It's very reinvigorating because being a game developer is a very difficult job. So having moments of levity where you can see a person face to face and they're just kind of showing how engaged they are with the things that you created and the art you brought into this world, it's really exciting.
This is a dawn that Tyria shall never forget. This day is ours.
After launch, very similar to Guild Wars 1, we tried some really wild ideas. And the wild idea we tried after Guild Wars 2 shipped was this concept that we called Living World. And at the time, our then studio head, who was one of the original founders, challenged all of us on the development team on Guild Wars 2 to try to deliver an experience inspired by how popular Game of Thrones was on HBO at the time, of how everybody was talking about Game of Thrones and everyone was talking about this incredible experience of this water cooler moment where every time a new episode came out, it was all anyone could talk about. He challenged us to come up with what could we do in Guild Wars that would create an experience like that, which is where Living World was born from, of this concept of we would have episodic updates. Eventually we got to the point where we were delivering them every 2 weeks, where the game world would meaningfully change and the story would move forward, with the goal of having every 2 weeks everybody would show up and want to be a part of it. And the business model for that started off with originally, we just had those episodes given out for free, and that proved to not be very successful. We also took the updates out of the game immediately after, so you had to be there to experience it, more like a TV show. Turns out fans hated that idea, and so we pivoted from that, and then we started doing, if you showed up while the episode was live, you got it for free, and if you came after the 2-week window when it was live, you had to pay a small fee to get the episode. And we followed that model for a while, and that also was not a viable business model for us. And eventually we pivoted to going back to delivering expansions.
Ladies and gentlemen, what you just saw was the world premiere of the first expansion pack for Guild Wars 2.
We did Heart of Thorns, we did Path of Fire, eventually End of Dragons, and so we did a handful of really big paid expansions for Guild Wars 2 with Living World episodes in between.
I would say cross-departmental collaboration is the biggest component to game development. If you can't succeed in that, you're not going to make a game.
There is a lot more of an emphasis on that collaborative element.
You know, in the creative process, like, good ideas come from anywhere. There's entire features we built for the game that came from the mind of an artist, not a systems designer. There's artwork in the game that is inspired by something a designer said who had very little artistic skill.
People are surprise you all the time with how creative they are.
Even going back so far as, you know, the Coden being these giant polar bears on these iceberg ships was born out of 2 amazing concept art pieces that we had early on that just was the ships and these polar bear creatures, and it was like, this makes sense in our mind, and so we were inspired. And so a lot of what you see in the game and a lot of those cool moments are these inspirational points that we take from each other. And so when you talk about collaboration, it's not just about working side by side, but it's also about helping push each other to think outside the box, to find something new that we haven't considered before.
Crocatork was a hard one in that cross collaboration, just because like the request was, we need a large dragon. And every team along the way was like, how are we gonna do this?
He was such a giant dragon, and he is the asset, the art asset that we spent the most time on of any other asset in the game as a whole.
From concept, to modeling, to rigging, that was a big one. How we're gonna animate it, how we're gonna frame it, what's the sound, like even the audio team, like how do you make something sound big and impressive compared to the rest of the mix?
Ended up being 16 months of development time.
You had designers sitting next to programmers, the environment artists sitting next to the designers to figure out how we were going to have the content flow throughout there, or working with the animators or the effects artists to really kind of make sure that it was a cohesive experience.
And so how we planned to use him over the Living World story was very strategic. And as we were continuing to create the art, it was like, well, how can we utilize him in Path of Fire? Okay, well, you can have his head. We can finish his head, and okay, well, let's focus on. And so that development process of going through an asset that's just so massive, but in a timeline where you're releasing something in a short time frame, how you're planning that out, how you're scheduling it, how you're building that asset, there was a lot going into that planning.
Dragonfall, where Crocatork's falling through the void and down into the water to become an island, was the hardest cinematic to make, just because we had this giant asset. and you're trying to like film it to be all in frame and not have clipping plane issues and not have LOD issues, which we did constantly. So it's like this battle between making it feel large, having it be in frame, and not clipping. It was a joy, I'll just say.
Having a franchise that has persisted for so long means that it has just like a wealth of stuff to build upon, like the lore potential.
Narratively, I think we've grown in our storytelling quite a bit. I think that our characters really shine in Guild Wars 2. Not that they didn't in Guild Wars 1, but we have become a bit more of a character-focused narrative. So that's a big change. But honestly, I feel like that only just enriches the world, because then you're seeing the humans or the Tar or the Asura or whatever that live in this world and how they react to it and everything like that. So I actually feel like the shifts in how we've treated narrative have only been complementary to the overall franchise.
I'm going to dream now.
There are definitely big moments in our story, whether it's the ending of the Elder Dragon saga, which was a huge moment for us. The one that I was the most excited about is actually the end after that. We had been trying to sort of cement a relationship with Casimir and Marjorie, two of our core characters, that from their introduction, they'd kind of had this, hint of a relationship.
Hey, what's wrong? You've been unusually quiet today. Look, they're so cute.
We kept trying to find a place to like really solidify what this means. And we tried at the end of our first expansion, and it didn't fit. And so we tried to find another place in the second expansion. Also, it was like, now this is just it's too distracting. And so with the ending of the Elder Dragon saga, this felt like the best time to have a really calm, quiet moment just for them.
Well, friends, you're probably wondering why we asked you here today.
And I was thrilled because I think our community had been wanting that as much as we had been wanting to do it.
You stood by me through everything.
So seeing the community get to that point and seeing, people on live streams crying, sobbing, that it's, tears of joy that they finally got to see this emotional moment pay out. And I was like, yeah, that's why we do this.
Yeah, I think one of the most impactful and I think just moments that stick out to me in my time back at ArenaNet was actually the release of End of Dragons back in 2022. Because there was just so much that went on kind of behind the scenes and leading up to that moment that made it feel so powerful for us at the studio. We had come off a layoff back in 2019, and then you slap a global pandemic on top of all of that, and it was pretty much a recipe for things just being really tough.
COVID was definitely an adventure. I remember the first day that they pulled us into the conference room, which was ironic since they were announcing a pandemic that they pulled everyone into a conference room. But be that as it may, they let us know that what was going on and that we'd be closing the office. At the time, it seemed like it was going to be a week or two, but I've been working from home since.
The thing that I thought was really cool, leadership made the statement that if we make online worlds and we connect people in this online world, then we absolutely can figure out how do we work together online. And that rally call, I think, really kind of brought us together.
We ended up releasing End of Dragons in early 2022, and I think it was really vindicating and just helped us, get past, I think, one of the darker chapters in ArenaNet's history with such a strong, successful release for us.
I think our relationship with the community has definitely been a huge, motivating factor over the years.
I feel nothing but very fortunate and very grateful that there's a community that has supported this stable project that we can continue to expand, continue to work on.
The fact that they've been on this journey with us for so long is just been awe-inspiring for us.
A lot of the connections that the community makes among themselves is incredibly exciting.
There are people from all over the country. There are people who meet across the world. There are people who met online and then got married in real life. That's magical.
There was this community of players called Gamers Giving Back who used to exist, and they used to do this stuff called Pink Day in LA, which was raising money for like breast cancer awareness. And also every year they and another guild do this thing called Tyria Pride, where a whole load of players get into the game together, get as rainbowed up as they can, and they march from end to end in Tyria. Getting to walk through Tyria with those people, getting to be a part of that fundraising and that community, like especially during the pandemic where everybody was locked in, is just really wholesome.
I also said to you right from the beginning that we would make Guild Wars 2 the first truly social online world. A world where you, your friends, everyone around it, you're all in it together, working together, relying on each other, where you're always happy to see another player. Now, something magical happened. You, the Guild Wars 2 community, you took that one and you made it your own. You have cemented your reputation as the single friendliest community in all of online gaming. Yes. Give yourselves a hand.
Over time, slowly, as the audience has changed and the size of the engagement for the product has shifted, we can no longer do giant expansions and living world all at the same time. And so what we do today is every year we ship one new expansion for Guild Wars 2, and that expansion is broken up basically into 4 parts. There's a launch day version of the expansion where you get to experience a lot of the new features and a lot of the new region and story. And then every 3 months after that, in quarterly updates, we add chunks of the expansion until over the course of a full year, the expansion is released, and then we release another one. And we've been operating that model now for 2 years.
It's been awesome to see the transition from the sporadic cadence, Heart of Thorns to Path to Fire, into something that's more regular for our players, so they have more expectations or clearer expectations about what's coming for them.
I ascribe very highly to this concept of the light at the end of the tunnel theory with an MMO, of if players don't see a light at the end of the tunnel, if they don't believe in the future, and if they don't have enough information to understand about where the game is going in the future to have that belief, then you are in huge trouble. And so, yeah, we watch really carefully what fans are talking about, what they're saying, the player sentiment within our community. And when we deliver things, we very often, every year we do a big retrospective on our expansion and talk about what went well and what didn't. What did we learn from you? What are you all saying that you didn't like? And here's what we're going to do to try to make it better next time.
Fundamentally, we sort of always look at what do players need? We try to solve player problems or fill gaps in the sort of player fantasy. For one of our recent ones, for example, Giant Theater Wilds, we're like, well, people love Tyria so much, they probably want a place to live in it. So that's why we settled on adding homesteads, because it's like people want to be able to have a home in the world that they love so much.
This place is no longer home to me, but perhaps it can be for you.
No way! Really? Oh my god. Housing? Housing? They did it! They're about to make so much money!
When we start a new expansion, there's always kind of an early brainstorming through narrative, design, art, okay, what is design and narrative thinking as what's the story? Where do we want to go? Where did we leave off? Where are the characters going? What's going to be our conflict? What's going to be the story? And then we start thinking about, okay, where haven't we gone?
In all the new content, new expansions, there's always a goal of trying to show players a new experience or a new twist on Guild Wars 2 that they haven't done before.
In our brainstorming sessions, it is really cool seeing what if we do this crazy thing, or what if we so you can kind of get out of the box.
We can have very serious stories, we could have humorous stories, we can go a little bit horror, we can go a little bit light. I'm still waiting for a musical. I keep poking narrative about this. Come on, let's just do it, musical expansion.
So for the next expansion, one of the ideas was, tropical. We wanted to go for kind of a adventurous, tropical, but jungle, danger, extreme magic, kind of a Bermuda Triangle-y kind of, okay, why hasn't this place been explored before? Why hasn't anybody talked about this? Well, because nothing escapes from it.
This must be Castora.
So it is.
Visions of Eternity, it has been an interesting creative process because the player is going to a new land that they've never been before. It allows us a lot of creative freedom to like make something new, but there's also the challenge of like making it feel like a part of the game, integrated with the rest of the lore.
It's the first time in a long time, if ever, that we are giving the players just like a whole new place. And I think that has given us a lot of challenges, right? Like creating an entirely new space that had no previous reference or culture. But I think it also means that it gave us a lot of freedom and flexibility to really shape the space in the way that we wanted to. Our goals, our kind of highest level goals, were exploration and discovery. If you look deep enough and if you spend the time to kind of go to all parts, you're always going to find something intriguing. And that is something that I am very excited about.
It's always fun seeing some of the new technology coming in or new, like, clever ways to build something. Looking into Visions of Eternity, I don't want to spoil too much, but we had internal tests going on where I encountered an event and I was watching it and thinking, how did they pull this off?
Commander, we've been cleared to sail. Our crew's all here, just getting things boarded up and ready to go.
It's been cool from like the story standpoint of like trying to decide what sort of existing lore we want to weave in there. How does this build upon the existing lore? How does this enrich the world as a whole? What is this giving to players? How is this like creating a new and unique experience for them without being limited by like what happened in Guild Wars 1 or, you know, even what happened earlier in Guild Wars 2?
One of the biggest challenges that I have as a narrative designer is keeping it all straight in my head. Guild Wars as a franchise has been around now for 20 years, and that's a lot of information. I remember a lot, but I don't remember everything. I don't always remember which parts are things we concepted, which parts we published, which parts are out there in interviews versus whether, right? Like, I use the community a lot, whether it's going to our wiki.
The wiki community in particular, like how detailed all those pages are.
I'll tell you, our player wiki is when we talk about stuff internally and we're like, hey, what is this event all about? One of our designers will link the public documentation on things before trying to look at the internal documents, because the internal documents, it's all over the place, right? The wiki is going to be like spot on some things.
To verify, did we say that? Where did we say that? How often do we say that? Making sure that I'm checking against what the community, which is amazing at like condensing all the stuff that we have put out there. They do that so well that I use them as a resource all the time.
Every time I play another game and I'm like, oh, let's try to find out what this quest is about. I'm like, yeah, this isn't as nice.
Legends were born that day. And while this threat was ended, the legends would continue.
You know, we still have this tradition of we want to respect the origins of this, because we also know that not all of the Guild Wars 1 fans became Guild Wars 2 fans. Like, they found something in there and they really loved it. And so we want to continue to support that and protect that as long as we can.
You know, this year's Guild Wars 1 turns 20. And I think the cool thing there is not only did we as a studio celebrate it by, you know, making announcements and releasing some surprises to a 20-year-old game, and showing people, hey, not only is it still available, the servers are still on, your stuff is still there, you could go back in and play it. But there are a lot of people who never played it at all who were then like, hey, maybe I'll give this a shot.
We're doing an event where we're all replaying Guild Wars 1 together with real people.
Some of our most dedicated streamers started holding events just welcoming people in and saying, hey, I'm going to spend this entire month playing this game that was a big part of my life back then, and I'm going to bring you all for the ride.
Oh, I see. Oh, look at this. Look at this. Let's just be part of it.
Guild Wars 1 has been up 100% for the last 6 years. The original goal was 5 nines, 99.999%, which is 5 minutes a year of downtime. Yeah, we've had about 32 hours total over the entire course of Guild Wars 1. So what is that, 99.995 or something? It's extraordinary. And then for Guild Wars 2, where there's way more active development, and actually, you know, it's like 99.95 or something, which is extraordinary given the huge amount of change. Like, went from 17 gigs to 70 gigs that we've shipped now, and all kinds of new game modes, and it's all down to quality engineering, a quality mindset, just really giving people the time to do the job right, because then when it's done, you can move on to the next thing and you just get this compounding product of greatness, really. It's just fantastic. So for me, it's just more than a technical achievement. It's an entire studio achievement. And the reason other companies don't do it is because it wasn't built into what they do.
We're going to continue to support this game as long as we can, because we also believe it's part of that foundation of what it means to be Guild Wars, or what it means to be ArenaNet IP.
I don't know if there's a lot of places where like you have employees who've been here for like 20 years.
I started at ArenaNet late 2004.
At various like company-wide meetings, we'll be like, okay, for this month, here's the list of anniversaries. And there's people who have been here longer than me, and some of them have the same hire month as me. So every time it comes up, I'm like, yeah, 17 years, that's impressive, but here's the guy with 18. I'm like, oh, okay.
21 years.
This year, I'll be hitting my 20-year anniversary, so.
There's very, very few game studios out there that have folks who have stayed that long. And we also have a huge history of boomerangs, as we like to call ourselves, of people who've been here a long time and then we leave. And we go somewhere else and we realize there is really something special about this place, and we come back.
And I was here for about 9 years, and then left for a handful of years, now I'm back.
We've seen over time, myself included, those of us who eventually find employment somewhere else, there's always this natural pull to come back because there's something special here.
And this is a great place. And as one of its leaders, like, I'm gonna do my damnedest to make sure we have another 20 years after this.
We care about our people, and in doing so, that makes everyone put forth their best effort. And so we end up, I think, providing our community, our players, with that same sense of love. It's sort of like paying it forward.
Also, beyond just the people, I love the franchise. Like, I love the world that we've built. I feel like a certain level of stewardship for it at this point, because I've worked on it for so long. I honestly can't really imagine working on a different game. Like, I just love Tyria.
This is, for many of us, the world we would love to be in.
Even after 20 years, there's still a lot of stories left to be told. I have just like the longest list of like, oh, I want to touch on that at some point.
Your future could be with us.
The biggest risk of building a game like this is it's really easy to stop taking chances. To stop trying to take risks, because the scope is so big, and because it's so monolithic, and there's so much time that goes into it, and they're so expensive to make, that a lot of times it's very easy to make the easy choice and say, let's just pick this that we know we can deliver, and then let's guarantee we can hit it and we don't have to worry about it. But it's not what this genre needs. What this genre desperately needs is people asking, how do we do something new? How do we take what we've all been playing for 20 years and try to turn it on its head and evolve or innovate, and being willing to fail sometimes by trying new things? And that's the DNA of ArenaNet. That's what we're all about.
Our story is not done. Guild Wars is going to keep going, and I think we're going to keep trying to push boundaries, and I think that our legacy here has to be being a bunch of good humans trying to do cool things.
I think the legacy of Guild Wars, to me, is kind of continuous. Yes, it has been 20 years, and you can kind of pause and look back and see how our community has supported us, how our creative endeavors and kind of explorations and stuff had continued, and we're building this world, but you don't sit and look back too much. For me, I'm proud of what we've created, but also excited for what we're going to create.
I'm excited for the next 20, because the same drive that I had when I first started here is still throughout this building. I feel like while we've gotten past the first chapter, we're still just continuing to write this novel.